in the concerted and joint action of the 12 mighty Elohim is to be found not only a shield of protection, but likewise an action that will establish round about you here in this world of form all that you could possibly conceive for your own best good, all that you might need, even for your enjoyment in the light. All of that is to be had within this action that is ongoing with the mighty Elohim. When it comes to this blessed white fire, the white light of righteousness, that is the core of all of the other rays, that is the affirmative, positive totality of God purity and the dazzling action of the light. In this, there is the fulfillment of everything that you could ever require or conceive of in life. For human beings who have for so many hundreds of thousands of years or longer in an unbroken succession of human embodiments, as being incomplete in their outer selves, the entire human race has accepted the outer appearance of that neediness and incompletion as the norm of mortal existence. And that is, unfortunately, the case when it comes to mere mortality, mere humanity. In the God consciousness of the 12 mighty Elohim, in their fused activity, there is to be found more of the nature of every individualization of the mighty I Am presence, which is the antithesis of mortality. How, then, are the Ascended Masters to uplift your consciousness until you are able to experience firsthand what it is to abide within this white fire core of pristine and absolute immaculate purity, the stainless mirror of the heart and mind of God that precedes all coming to be of creation? Perhaps a little bit of contrast will heighten the revelation of the divine nature of your own God presence. Think of the gamut, the litany of the human condition. Think of what it means, for example, to in any way be needy. And while you're thinking of that for yourself or for anyone else, remember the Wonder Man of Europe. Remember the Mahatmas, Morya and Kuthumi. Can you ever imagine them as being needy in anything, emotionally or otherwise? The human is needy because it is incomplete. There is a vulnerability and fragility to mortal existence. We live within a very narrow zone of temperature. We live on the thinnest veneer of the surface of the earth, not going very far above or far below. Life is fragile because of this mortality. There is a whole series of appetites and hungers. The physical body gets hungry. The emotions and the mind, too, need to be fed externally, be doing something of one sort or another. Then, in addition to appetites, perhaps worst of all, many life streams in their mortality find themselves at the mercy of certain compulsions that their free will is hardly able to rein in. Nagging compulsions that just always seem to be nipping at their heels, of all manner and all sorts. All of those things, none of those things are in your own true God self. For every one of those, you could consider the antithesis, and you could apply it to your own mighty I Am presence. Your God presence is whole to the nth degree, as is the great God flame. Your God presence is perfect. And although perfection has other overlays in the English language, in ancient times, wholeness and perfection were absolutely interchangeable synonyms of one another. If you were whole, you were perfect. If you were perfect, you were whole. Even Jesus, speaking in the Greek of his time, said, I will be crucified and dead, and on the third day I will be perfected. Meaning that in the resurrection, he would have restored to him that original wholeness of the God presence. As you will soon hear, this is not only a sufficiency to one's own identity. In other words, it is not just a wholeness that is adequate to oneself, but it is, and here we're getting into a consciousness that applies to the mighty I Am presence, it is a supra-fullness that is more than full, and therefore is capable of sharing that undiminished, overflowing outpouring of its own intrinsic nature without being diminished itself, and yet having all that it could possibly share with every other part of life. Truly, as has been an axiom down through the ages, or down through the Ascended Master activities, the statement has been repeated: in the fullness of the presence is the love, all the love that you require and all of the things that you truly need and desire. They are all there in the fullness of your own individual mighty I Am presence. If this be so, and it is, how have we come to the current impasse with the fallen potential of mankind? It is part of the science of what was euphemistically referred to as the law of the circle. Our shield is one such circle. The electronic circle is one such circle. When Maury and Kuthumi were bound by the occult law, the best they could do was to draw forth the symbol of the serpent swallowing its own tail, which was an esoteric version of this principle of the law of the circle. There are levels of simplicity and greater levels of intricacy to this principle, but it is absolutely pivotal to unlocking the key of why there is weakness and neediness and impotence, vulnerabilities and compulsions within the mortal nature. The divine ideal, when it began, is whenever any aspect of reality, such as an individualization of the mighty I Am presence, was going to send forth this undiminished giving of its own selfhood, there was the complement to that outpouring known as the law of the circle. And perhaps it would be better to call it a circuit or a circular flow. It does not need to be at all in the perfect geometry of a circle as that is defined geometrically. But what does need to happen, and what does happen in the divine realms, is that that which pours forth goes forth and then returns back to its point of origin. This activity taking place in life is one of those most basic and most inexorable actions that takes place. Karmic return, is one of the phenomenon associated with the law of the circle. It means that when something gives of itself, or some part of life, or an individualization of God, such as your mighty I Am presence, gives of itself, as that flows forth, it may flow forth into a great multiplicity, but it never, mind you, it never is cut off from itself. It never snaps into this outpouring of the essence and power of the originating source. It always retains an intrinsic oneness, which means that even as it goes forth, it will and does flow back upon itself. And that process takes place throughout all of God's kingdom, in the realms of eternity and in the realms of coming to be. This flowing forth and returning back unto itself. This is the divine ideal way in which your beloved mighty I Am presence, if we may use the term, propagates its own individuality. For example, when the mighty I Am presence puts itself forth out into the nirvanic world, yes, it sends that threefold flame into that world and builds up the causal body. But there is a circulation so that that which goes forth radiates forth, but it also returns back to the electronic body. Yes, the mighty I Am presence puts itself forth into the Buddhic world, sending its threefold flame there. But that Buddhic vehicle is never chopped in two. It is never bifurcated and separated from the source of the mighty I Am presence in the electronic body. And so there is a flowing forth, and then there is the filling of whatever space, the accomplishment of whatever service to life is to be rendered, and then there is the return current, the contemplative adoration and identification of that which has gone forth, giving the glory and the identification back to the God self. Certainly it is axiomatic that your Christ presence knows itself to be the oneness of the mighty I Am presence. There is no sense of duality between those two. This has been worked out by your beloved Saint Germain with a very mathematic and philosophical, logical precision to a very nth degree, to where that propagation goes forth. And right now we are concerned about maintaining the closed loop of identity, the flow of that through that whatever might be the manifold of creation, the multiplicity that comes out from the source, goes out, and the fact that it flows back upon itself and goes back into the source. The examples of this in nature and in life are numberless. It is something that is repeated over and over again. And by the operation of this basic action that takes place in life, the mighty I Am presence is able to transmit power. It is able to lower its power to where it needs to be worked with, to where it needs to be exerted as activity and force, and produce the fruit in life. As long as that return current goes back to the source, a couple of things happen. One, there is no duality of consciousness, no fall from grace, no separation. There is therefore no cessation to the undiminished giving, because as it goes forth, so too does it return. And by the way, when it returns, it is multiplied. There is always interest paid on the power that has flowed forth. This principle was taught by Jesus in the parable of the talents. And the three servants who were given various amounts of talents, two of whom increased them, the third brought back the exact amount that he had been given and was scolded for that fact, that there was no increase. So there is always an enriching of life as the return current takes place. This is absolutely necessary in life. And during the original first golden ages of the original root races, that process did not stop with the causal body or the Christ presence, but was continued by the mind, was continued by the threefold flame in the emotional body, and was continued in the physical body. The caduceus action of that light, whatever came down, was permitted to perform its perfect work, and then the glory was given to the source, the I Am presence as the doer, the consciousness focused by the threefold flame in each of those vehicles held its tethering to its identification that it was the I Am presence in action, and that the presence was the real doer, the real dynamo, the real source of all power and good that was entrusted into the keeping and the guidance and the use of the various vehicles. And therefore, all that was below was as all that is above in the mighty I Am presence. Power was transferred. Power was conserved. Power was utilized constructively. And the outer was necessarily just the expression of the perfection of the presence. And not only was there this raw power, if you will, transferred, but that consciousness of the presence and the wholeness of the presence, the self-sufficiency of that presence, the constitution, the self-constituted nature of that I Am presence. And so the unascended life waves that came forth at that time exhibited what we would today call a true golden age or an Edenic life, because there was in all case this knitting together of all of the vehicles with that full-fledged return current back to the God identity. When the fall of mankind came about, this process was short-circuited and interrupted. As the light of the crystal cord flowed forth into what we now refer to as the four lower bodies, it was seized upon by those vehicles. They overwhelmed the still small voice of the threefold flame and spent that power and life on whatever were the elemental impulses of the various vehicles. And so rather than there being an equal and opposite or return flow back to the heart of the presence, the light was coming down and going out and being driven more and more into the so-called earthy. And as a result of that, that is when incompletion first appeared. That is when neediness, unfulfilled desires. And that is when, over the course of time, as those various elemental appetites were indulged, that from one embodiment to the other, although they were not returning vertically back to the I Am Presence, they were going out. And then those things were coming back, and life streams were finding themselves compelled under certain drives and compulsions that over which they felt they had no control, because it was this law of life that every impulse returns back to its point of origin. And in this case, the fallen mind and emotions being the origin, that too is where those things returned. Students, torchbearers of the temple, you have the gift and the authority in the palm of your hand to choose no longer to be separate from your source. You have the opportunity of awakening, realizing your relationship to that presence, and crystallizing the firm resolve of your free will that henceforth you will no longer be disassociated from that source. And you will understand that in the way that that is to be done is just as it is still going on in the inner vehicles of your causal body and your Buddhic vehicle. As we said earlier, there the light of the I Am Presence goes forth. It energizes all of the causal body, keeps it as a storehouse of power. But that is not like some stagnant pond. Your causal body is not a still body of water that is choked with moss and algae. No, it is ever flowing. It is a clear stream of power that flows through and keeps that body fully charged, so that there is an out-breath and an in-breath, and there is the total circulation of that system. So too with the Christ presence. So too, it can be again with your 4 lower bodies, to where you as your heart flame, you as the heart flame of your mighty I Am Presence, can reassert the reins of authority over each of your vehicles in turn, and guide those energies in each of those bodies back to the source where it belongs. The mechanism of that flow of that circuit, sometimes it's been referred to as a figure-8 flow. In the East, they have an understanding of it in the etheric double of the physical body as the caduceus. Let us see what the examples of that are in the various vehicles. Well, of course, in the memory body, one of the ways in which you re-establish the free flow and closed circuit that has been aborted is by guiding the faculty of your memory body to put your attention on certain things. And now you know of your mighty I Am presence and the electronic body, and you are able to monitor your attention and those things which you pour your life's energy into via the attention. And as you know of your mighty I Am presence, and you are able to attune the attention with that, then you are reestablishing that incessant circular flow or circuitry of flow back to the electronic body through the attention. There is limitless blessing and power that flow from full God control over that faculty of the attention in the memory body. You can decide, for example, what you will allow your attention to feed into over a longer or a shorter period of time. Earlier in the week, we were working on the fact that you can focus your attention just like you focus the focal length of your eyesight. Take it off of the foreground of what might be the outer appearance of imperfection and put it on the white fire core of the presence of God that is behind the veil, and see perfection everywhere. Put your attention on that perfection. That in that memory body, then you are putting your attention there on your mighty I Am presence. In the mind, it is not exactly attention. In the mind, it is thought. In the mind, in the mental body, it is communing with the ideas that are cognized by the mighty I Am presence. Thoughts of perfection. Patterns of perfection. Patterns of divine identity. Uplifting thoughts. Not critical thoughts. Not thoughts of miscreation that are recycling so much of the human imagination, but thoughts that similarly return back to the mighty I Am presence, to your own mighty I Am presence. In this mind body, the force of life becomes very apparent. And in one sense, it is absolutely correct that the four lower bodies act as a composite instrument. And what goes on in one is immediately reflected in the others. And as you will see in just a few moments, what happens with the life that comes into the physical flesh body, how that is utilized, directly affects your mind, your thoughts, and your emotions. When the life forces are not returned back to the heart of the mighty I Am presence in any of the vehicles, including the physical body, when they are permitted to be dashed upon the earth, when the sacred fire is wasted and misused, that creates a corkscrew type action that winds itself about the mind, the outer mind. And so the outer mind then becomes what St. Paul called the carnal mind. or the reprobate mind. And that is when individuals find it hard, difficult, if not nigh impossible, to hold to patterns of perfection, to hold to uplifting thoughts. When they find that the things of the realms of the great central sun, all of these realms, those thoughts don't feed their mind. They don't hold their attention. They don't resonate and give feedback to the mind and consciousness. So that type of mind has to go in search of other types of less savory things, and it tends to drag down the mind. How much more this is the case in the feeling world over time. The feeling body, when the forces of life are not returned back to the mighty I Am Presence, becomes a wide open, vulnerable state of affairs. So too the mind is very suggestible by aggressive mental suggestion, and open to wildfires of trends that cause certain amount of mass hysteria, group thinking, all kinds of collective groupthink that takes place, because the mind is not a radiating sun, but it is something that is drawn in. One of the ways that the masters have explained this is that when there is not the return of the life and light and power that the I Am Presence gives, when it isn't permitted to flow back to the God Presence, it travels in a spiral action that is, instead of it being a radiating sun that is flowing forth thusly, flowing forth in a clockwise way, pouring out from the individual, instead of it being like that, it is like a vacuum cleaner sucking action counterclockwise. The chakras are more or less always open to the riptides of mass emotion, the riptides of carnal-minded thought, because there is not this return current. This applies even to the physical body as well. There are so very many ways in life that human beings think that they are born with certain needs, born with certain momentums that are insurmountable, that are just the way they are and just the way life is. And admittedly, where there is not this giving back to the mighty I Am Presence of all of the glory and life and light that is poured forth by the I Am Presence in that return current, when that does not take place, either one person or a whole group of people are in a bad way, because there's always more of that light which is behind what is flowing along the crystal cord. More is coming and more is coming and more is coming. And it may pool for a while, held in abeyance, but as it builds up, sooner or later, it is going to have to find some expression. And for human beings, not knowing of their I Am Presence, or in some cases knowing but not caring, if they do not give it back to the presence, they are going to find that they are wrestling with Leviathan, wrestling with Behemoth. They are contending with forces of nature that are ultimately macrocosmic in scale and scope. And they will be overpowered by those things unless the return current is raised up. And when the sacred fire is raised up through all of the vehicles and is given back to the mighty I Am presence, astonishing things happen in the sense of true liberation. The word liberation is used in certain of the yogic schools, where they say that, for example, the sacred fire, when it is properly raised up and mastered, it gives liberation to yogis. But if not, it compels bondage to fools. Human beings who foolishly think that the profligate misuse and anything that is not in accordance with what the mighty I Am presence intends as a creative and constructive blessing that is not self-centered, but is a givingness to other parts of life. Anything other than that is, in fact, a misuse. Admittedly, it makes for a great deal of uncomfortability. Admittedly, it makes for a condition that when it came to, in the emotional body, when you had that condition, where there is not the return back to the presence, that is when people become very fearful, very full of suspicion. And Jesus' term for it was that it was that form of desire is a bottomless pit. And what he meant by that is that although you might find that your desires are satisfied one day, you wake up the next morning and there are greater desires that have to be satisfied, and then more the next day after that, and more the next day after that. And it's all due to the fact that all of the wholeness of the mighty I Am presence, all of the supra-fullness and completeness and self-sufficiency of the I Am presence, that it is as the individualization of the presence, the individualization of God good, of everything good within itself. All of that is dashed onto the outer world, poured out, and you have this one directional flow down and out. And that has resulted in the whole phenomenon of human experience, mortal experience. For all of our vaunted science and all of the things that we do, there are human beings still are at the mercy of the upheavals in nature, which are generally when nature shrugs off the superpositioning of human misqualification upon it by masses and hundreds of millions of life streams over thousands of years. Eventually, that is shrugged off by nature. But that is really not the divine design. The divine design is as the pattern of perfection of the ascended master to be and of the cosmic being to be. And what the Ascended Masters would have the whole world know is that they are not interested in moralizing. They're not interested in preaching. They're not interested in pinning the tail on the donkey, the tail of sin and belittlement to any part of life. What they are interested in is exalting the heart flame and the I am presence of the Godhead charioteer into its victory and its mastery. And this, if it can dawn upon you, if you can really see it, you will understand that what beloved Saint Germain calls the life stream of the universe, this irresistible electronic power and force that that drives everything in life. Really and truly, it is higher action of the Kundalini fires that ignites the nuclear furnace of suns. That is the sacred fire at work. The currents of earth and air and fire and water and akasha are all fueled by those Leviathan feathered serpents that are really the upraised solar forces at work. And these are the things that take incipient, needy, weak human beings, and when they are mastered, enable them to obtain their mastery. How does that mastery come about? Well, believe it or not, when that light is resurrected, as in the use of the affirmation, I am the resurrection and the life. As that occurs and as transmutation occurs, first of all, the feelings, instead of being a vacuum cleaner open to the sludge of mass consciousness, the feelings are accelerated until they throw off their own discord and then become a sun radiating forth, containing the dazzling light. The mind, too, instead of being a reprobate mind that gravitates to all types of human vanity, the mind is uplifted. It has the winged sandals of Perseus, and the mind all of a sudden dines upon the banquet of the ideas and ideals of the mind and heart of God. And even the physical body, too, is accelerated. This is an action that must reach down through all of the four lower bodies. From the perspective of the Ascended Masters, it is so very clear what is needed for true adeptship and mastery. For one of the consequences of the not returning things back to the source, one of the consequences of not allowing the presence to remain one with itself all the way to the physical, is that there has been an unbelievable deceleration of the bodies, the vehicles, over the millennia of time. They are many octaves more sluggish and slow than they should be. And the whole of your path So much of your path is really about going about the process very scientifically of re-accelerating your vehicles, causing them to truly be filled with more light, for the cells and the atoms to spin faster and faster, and for them to be orders of magnitude more high rates of frequency than they are at present. The emotional, the mental, the memory body, and the physical body and the etheric double have to be re-accelerated to a tremendous degree. And that is the work of at least one lifetime, if not more. Your four lower bodies are your tools. They are your machinery, the instrument that you as the heart flame need to keep in perfect working order. And all of the parts need to be humming with perfection and re-accelerated, because only in that stepped up, regenerated, resurrected, accelerated mode, only then are they suitable to be a grail through which the fierce intensity of the light of the I Am Presence can come through. That is not a cop-out. That is not a convenient, pat answer to give why everyone isn't performing miracles, but it is an absolute truth. It is an absolute truth. In this work, your laboratory or the instruments or the machinery that you work with, the tools that you need are your own vehicles of consciousness. Not to touch too much upon some things happening in the world, but all the time we hear a plaintive cry somewhere around the world, cries to America and other nations, send us the tools that we need to defend ourselves, to send us the tools we need to cultivate our land, to build our dams, or whatever the case might be. Send us the technology to be able to do these things for ourselves. For your path, your tools are your bodies. And the work with those bodies is absolutely, the preparation of them is most scientific. The violet flame, for example, is not only for the purpose of transmuting negative karma. The violet flame is also instrumental in the raising up of the frequencies of the vehicles themselves. The karma is sloughed off, it goes into the violet flame, yes, but the physical body, the flesh, the etheric double, the emotional body, the mental body, the skeins of the memory body, all of these have over so very many hundreds or thousands of lifetimes, they have slowed down. And now they have to be re-accelerated back so that they are synchronized. They can be used for the transmittal of the omnipotent power of your own mighty I Am presence. Your presence is as powerful as any of the unascended masters were before their ascension. The difference is that they had spent a lot of time and a lot of care working on and working with their own vehicles. You might recall Kuthumi talking about how even from where he was in the hinterland, foothills of the Himalayan mountain ranges, that he talked about the meticulous care that he had to keep the mind plane of his own world free of the overlays of mass consciousness. And so we're not talking about everybody pulling out a bed of nails and practicing those kinds of yogic austerities. But we are talking about Resurgam Christos. I am the resurrection and the life. We are talking about, in each vehicle in turn, having that completion of the circuit back to the I am presence. The mind completing it with the memory body with attention, the mind with perfect thought and contemplation of the presence, the heart and feelings with love and adoration to the presence, and the physical body with the conservation of the sacred fire, the holding it within the vehicles for constructive uses that the I am presence would deem important, and the flow back up of that substance back to the I am presence. When that begins to be achieved, you will find that the wholeness in consciousness, the supra-fullness of your I am presence, is transferred into the chalice of your four lower bodies. And I don't quite know exactly how to explain this, but if you can imagine the caduceus action, the one coming down with all of its tremendous power, when there is an equal and opposite return current of that same sacred fire that is preserved and conserved and returned back to the I am presence, those two, as powerful as they are, they form a tranquility, a balance with internally, which means that you are in a state of poise. It's like being in the eye of a hurricane. There is this poise and equanimity and sense of well-being, and not the slightest bit of strain of either the downward or the upward flow of that sacred fire. It is a tranquility and a sense. And nonetheless, power is still deposited there. It is still preserved there and held in reserve to go forth on whatever constructive service to life your heart flame and your God presence deem worthy of your service. Truly, no one will ever find liberation, freedom in the ascension, until they learn these principles and embrace them lovingly, identifying not with their outer impulses, but identifying with their God presence and reunifying that which has been broken, that which has been interrupted, of that unbroken flow that goes between these various realms. There is no greater momentum for this to be accomplished than the ray, the fourth ray of God purity, the archangels, the Chohans, the Elohim, and the other beings who serve on that glorious white fire core ray of purity, such beings as the goddess of purity, the mighty Snow King and his divine complement, and of course, beloved Purity and Astrea. Since we first had the teachings of the Ascended Masters, there was an action of the shield of Elohim that was known as the circle and sword of beloved mighty Astrea. The action of that circle, then the white fire, blue fire circle of the fourth ray of purity, was an action that was intended to be overlaid upon the remnants of the electronic circle. We haven't talked this conference about the electronic circle. A great deal of its science has been already taught in great specificity. But suffice it to say that not only is this action to be taken vertically, that is a caduceus action that goes between your electronic body up and down the crystal cord and the various vehicles, but it is also an action that in each realm, orchestrated and sent forth by the threefold flame, it goes out into life and then returns back. And the ideal is that there be a complete disengaging and disconnect from mortality and from the mass consciousness within a complete electronic circle. That electronic circle is the threefold activity of the pure white light. The threefold activity is the activity of your threefold flame, love, wisdom, and power. When that action takes place, there is a complete sealing of each one's individual life stream. Where it has been neglected for a long time, that is where Mighty Astrea's cosmic circle of sort of blue flame comes in, because that then augments each one's own electronic circle and acts as a ring pass knot, a threefold action that prevents anything of the mass consciousness from entering in. It is there in the shield of the Elohim, in those symbolic cherubs within the circle of the Elohim themselves, assisting and officiating in directing the radiance of each of the 12 mighty Elohim. So you can not only imagine the shield of Elohim in front of you, warding off any impulses in that sense, but you can also imagine that shield of Elohim where the electronic circle is, and the outpost, the focus of the 12 mighty Elohim at the various cardinal points around your world, standing guard there. And instead of your world being a maelstrom or a whirlpool that is drawing in, it is instead driven by the mighty I Am presence and the undiminished giving of the I Am presence through all the vehicles. It becomes your physical world in each of these dimensions, a radiating sun that pours forth the virtues of the 12 Elohim, the virtues of your mighty I Am presence, sending them forth into every part of life. Standing guard there, not only against those things that are outside of your own personal karma, but also what yet remains untransmuted of your human karma. That too can and is addressed by this circle of beloved mighty Astrea. It is seized and bound and annihilated the moment that it is up for transmutation. Of course, the key to all of this happening lies in the identification with your mighty I Am presence as the true self. And the return of everything in your world, the knitting together of all of those realms back to your mighty God presence. The principles at work in this are absolutely limitless. The story was told some time ago of how when the space race began, there were 7 astronauts chosen here in the United States to be the first 7 to go up into outer space. And then on the heels of that, they decided, well, they'll go for the moon. And that became the so-called Apollo mission. Now, it wasn't just human aspiration that allowed them to do that. There was a great deal of math behind it. There was a great deal of technological advancement in metallurgy and all kinds of propulsion systems. All of these things working in conjunction allowed for the aspiration of the human spirit to be fulfilled in that dubious desire to go to the moon. The principles that the Ascended Masters are sharing with you are just, and in fact are even more, principles of spiritual science. They are principles that govern prana, that govern life and light, that govern the threefold flame. And they too have to be studied. They have to be embraced as golden precepts that one wants to live by, because it is advisable to live by them. And as all of that is put together, and then you have the reinforcement of this collective momentum that the whole of the brotherhood, with the Elohim leading the charge, is seeking to assist mankind, to assist the sons and daughters of God, not in going to the moon, but in going back to the sun of your own electronic body on a one-way journey into the heart of that electronic body. In order for that to occur, you have no idea how much there must be light that is pumped into the physical body, pumped into the emotional body, the mind, the memory. All of these bodies have to be totally emulsified, regenerated under fingertip exquisite precision of control that requires the directing intelligence of the mind of God. All of this has to be done gradually. It has to be done with in accordance with cosmic law. And you yourselves are the explorers, if you will. The first echelon, you're like the Mercury 7. All of you have volunteered, and you are in your training for your final stages. The first stage of your ascent is the transfiguration, when there is a tremendous ventilation of the light through the bodies, made possible by the caduceus action, made possible by this poised, equipoise balance of the light coming down and the equal and same amount of light going up. Transfiguration. Stage 2 is the resurrection, when those 4 lower bodies are so regenerated that gravity loses its hold and they are drawn inexorably into the body of the Christ presence. And as we understand it, it's only when they are fully drawn into the Buddhic vehicle that the physical body and the other bodies finally take on the patterns of eternal youth that are the thoughts of the I Am Presence about itself as expressed through that Buddhic body. That's stage 2. And then, of course, stage 3, when you reach, what do they call that? Terminal velocity or exit velocity, when you are free of the gravity pull of the earth, is when that glorious crystal ray comes down from the mighty I Am Presence and envelops the now 5 lower bodies, the 4 lower bodies plus the higher mind of the Christ presence, and those 5 are drawn, and the causal 2 drawn into the electronic body. All of this must happen, and does happen, with much more mathematical and spiritually scientific principles at work than even the things that allowed us to go, the United States to go to the moon. The jet fuel for that is the mother light. It is the impetus that allows the power of God to be safely passed through the vehicles. And the only safe way to do that is for the pathway of that to have been well established, that even as it is received by the heart flame, there has been a well-established pathway for the current to travel going back into the heart of the mighty I Am Presence. O beloved, mighty Elohim of purity, beloved, mighty Astrea, beloved goddess of purity, blessed Archangel Gabriel and Hope, beloved holy Justinius, the great seraphic bands, and our own beloved Serapis Bey, we salute you one and all in the great zeal of the white fire core of purity's ray, in the interplay of the white fire, blue fire action of the power of the will of God expressing in conjunction with that white fire core as mighty Astrea's cosmic circle and sword. We pray that all of the students of the light and all who are willing to return the current back to their mighty I Am Presence might this very moment and every day henceforth be cut loose and set free, that there will be that perfect annihilation and erasure of the appearance of imperfection, of those animal magnetisms that have cleaved and clung to mankind for far too long. Cut us loose and set us free from all of those things. This which we call for ourselves, we call it forth as the shield of Elohim to include the entire astral plane of the physical world, cut loose and set free the entire mental plane, the serpentine and carnal mind with all of its human justifications and rationalizations, cut loose and set free all of those records in their dens and caves of darkness, in the memory subplanes of the planetary body, cut loose and set free in the etheric double, the odic forces of nature herself, that all of these might be stripped of all of those one-way overlays of discord, of that aspect of the bottomless pit. And in its place, let each and every one in turn become from the tiniest electron to the greatest globe, radiating suns of the bliss and joy, of the liberation and purity of the mighty I Am presence in all of life. We thank you, and we know that by the light of the great I Am, by the love of the presence of God, day upon day, cycle upon cycle, heartbeat upon heartbeat, this whirling disk of the shield of Elohim will continue to throw off and throw off and throw off all the depredations of human mortality, repudiating it, one and all, repudiating it for ourselves and repudiating it for our loved ones, the children of the light, far and wide across the face of the earth, and holding that shield as a stainless, dazzling solar disk that shields all from iniquity. We thank you and we accept it done. Amen.